Leave. That's all my dad had to say after I spent years keeping our family afloat. But what I told him next, it silenced the entire room. You could have heard a pin drop. If you've ever carried the weight of a family who didn't appreciate you, then you'll feel this story deep in your bones. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about justice served cold. My name is Hannah, and for most of my life, I wasn't really living for myself. I was living for my family. Bills, debts, groceries, rent, it all somehow landed on my shoulders. And if you're thinking I must be exaggerating, trust me, I wish I were. It started small, like these things usually do. My parents would ask me to help out with the electric bill when I got my first job. Then it was the water bill. Then gas. Before I knew it, my entire paycheck was vanishing into envelopes marked with red stamps that screamed final notice. While my friends were going on vacations, buying new clothes, or saving for college, I was standing in line at the bank, sweating as I transferred every last cent I had just to keep our lights on. I remember the first time I realized just how deep my family's financial mess was. I was 17, sitting at the kitchen table, when I saw my dad's stack of unpaid credit card bills. The numbers looked unreal, thousands upon thousands of dollars. I swallowed hard, thinking, how could anyone ever pay this back? But instead of being scared, I felt this crushing sense of responsibility, like it was suddenly my job to fix everything. And my dad. He never thanked me. Not once. If anything, he acted like it was expected. You live here, you contribute, he'd say, like I was just another roommate he could squeeze money out of. My mom would stay quiet, eyes cast down, never defending me, never stepping in. And my younger brother. He was too busy spending his allowance on video games to care. That's the thing about being the responsible one. You become invisible. Everyone gets so comfortable with you carrying the weight that they forget it's even heavy. I tried to tell myself it was temporary. That once things got better, I'd finally start living for me. But better never came. I worked double shifts at a diner, sometimes stumbling home at 2 in the morning with my uniform smelling like grease and coffee. My feet would ache so badly I'd cry in the shower just so no one could hear me. And the next morning, before I even had a chance to rest, my dad would bark at me about the rent being due or the car payment being late. Do you know what it feels like to sacrifice everything? Your time, your health, your dreams, and still be treated like you're not doing enough? It eats away at you. Slowly, silently. I kept pushing through, though. Because deep down, I thought maybe, just maybe, if I gave enough, my family would finally see me. They'd appreciate me. They'd respect me. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. Because all of my sacrifices, all of those sleepless nights and drained bank accounts, led to the moment that would shatter everything. The night my father looked me straight in the eye and yelled one single word that broke me in half. After my dad yelled that word, leave, I felt like the floor had opened beneath me. But before I tell you about that night, you need to understand the years that led up to it. Because that single word wasn't born out of nowhere. It was built, brick by brick, on years of neglect, entitlement, and disrespect. The truth is, my life had become a cycle. Wake up, work, pay bills, get criticized, repeat. My dad never once asked how I was holding up. He never cared that I was 22 and had no savings, no plans, no future of my own, because every paycheck I made evaporated into the family's endless pit of debt. And the worst part? They treated it like it was nothing. Like it was the natural order of things. My mom would sigh and mutter, "Your father's just under stress, Hannah. Don't take it personally." But stress doesn't excuse cruelty. And my brother, he had the luxury of pretending none of it existed. He'd stroll in with new sneakers or headphones, bought with the very money I worked myself to the bone to provide. I started noticing something that ate at me even more than the bills. My family wasn't trying. My dad would spend hours on the couch, flipping through channels, muttering about how life wasn't fair. My mom avoided confrontation, always retreating to the kitchen or her room. And my brother, well, he acted like he was entitled to comfort. After all, Hannah will handle it. There was one night I'll never forget. I came home from a 12-hour shift, hands blistered from carrying trays, my hair damp from sweat. On the table was a bill marked "Final Warning." My dad glanced at me, waved the paper in the air, and said flatly, "Handle this." "No, thank you." "No, are you okay?" Just a command, like I was nothing more than a tool for survival. I swallowed the lump in my throat, grabbed the bill, and quietly walked to my room. But when I shut the door, I broke down. My chest heaved, my stomach twisted, and tears soaked my pillow. I thought to myself, what would happen if I stopped? If I just said no? Would they even survive without me? But the guilt always won. Because as much as they drained me, they were still my family. And family, I thought, was worth saving. Over time, though, I started to see the truth. I wasn't saving them, I was enabling them. Every time I bailed them out, every time I stayed silent, I gave them permission to use me again. And that realization was terrifying. Because it meant that unless something changed, unless I changed, my entire life would be swallowed by their needs. I'd never escape. I'd never matter. That's when I began to notice the resentment bubbling inside me. Quiet at first, like a whisper, but louder with each passing day. And eventually, that whisper would turn into a voice that couldn't be ignored, the voice that would finally speak when my dad told me to leave. People like to say that family is everything. And for a long time, I believed that. I thought if I just gave more, sacrificed more, maybe one day my family would look at me with pride instead of expectation. But the more I gave, the more invisible I became. Every paycheck was gone before I could even think about myself. Rent, groceries, car insurance, medical bills, it was a never-ending list. I didn't even remember the last time I bought something just for me. My shoes had holes, my phone screen was cracked, and my idea of treating myself was getting a cup of gas station coffee instead of making one at home. Meanwhile, my dad always had beer in the fridge. My brother always had the latest game console. And my mom made sure to keep the kitchen stocked with his favorite snacks. I'd watch them, laughing together in the living room, while I sat on my bed balancing a checkbook that never added up. The worst part wasn't even the financial strain, it was the emotional weight. Every time my dad barked at me, every time my mom stayed silent, every time my brother shrugged off responsibility, I felt myself shrinking. Like I wasn't a daughter, or a sister, or even a person. I was a machine, built to keep everyone else comfortable. I remember one Sunday morning in particular. My friends had invited me to brunch, something normal 20-somethings do. I hesitated, wondering if maybe, just this once, I could say yes. But as I slipped on my jacket, my dad stopped me at the door. "Where are you going?" "We need gas money for the car. You can't be running off while we're scraping by here." My stomach dropped. I reached into my purse, pulled out the $40 I had set aside for myself, and handed it over. He snatched it like it was owed to him, not even a nod of thanks. I went back to my room, staring at the group text lighting up my phone, and typed, "Sorry guys, can't make it." And that's when it hit me, I wasn't living. I was surviving. For them. The resentment grew sharper after that. At work, when customers yelled at me over cold fries or wrong orders, I'd bite my tongue. But in the back of my mind, I wasn't just angry at them. I was angry at my family. Angry that I had no escape, no relief, no one in my corner. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the muffled sound of the TV in the other room, and my dad's laughter as if nothing in the world was wrong. And in those moments, I wondered, what if I just disappeared? Would they even notice, other than missing the money? That question haunted me. And as the days went on, it began to feel less like a question, and more like an answer waiting to happen. The thing about carrying other people's weight is that it doesn't crush you all at once. It chips away at you, day after day, until one morning you look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. That's where I was, worn out, hollow-eyed, and always bracing for the next demand. But if I thought things couldn't get worse, I was wrong. My dad started treating me less like a daughter and more like a built-in ATM. If the water bill was late, he'd slam the notice on the counter and bark, "You better figure this out." If the car needed repairs, he'd toss me the keys and say, "Handle it." And when groceries were low, he wouldn't even ask. He'd just point to his empty beer shelf like it was my personal responsibility to keep it stocked. The irony. He wasn't incapable of working. He just didn't want to. He picked up odd jobs here and there, but most nights he was on the couch, beer in one hand, remote in the other, muttering about how the world had wronged him. And my mom, she wasn't cruel, but she was complicit. Every time he snapped at me, she stayed silent. Every time I was forced to cover another bill, she looked away. Her silence cut deeper than his yelling ever could. Then there was my brother. He had developed this twisted sense of entitlement. If I didn't buy him the latest gadget, he'd sulk and throw passive-aggressive comments. "Must be nice having money for yourself," he'd say, ignoring the fact that I hadn't bought anything for me in years. One evening, I came home exhausted from a double shift. My hands smelled like fryer grease, and my feet felt like they were made of lead. I opened the fridge, hoping to find at least a slice of leftover pizza I'd bought with my own money the night before. But it was gone. I turned to see my brother, controller in hand, casually chewing the last bite. "Oh, that was yours," he said with a smirk. "You should have labeled it." My dad chuckled from the couch. My mom said nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, numb, staring at the empty plate in his hand. That tiny moment, losing something as small as a piece of pizza, hit harder than any bill notice ever had. It wasn't about food. It was about respect. About being treated like I mattered. And in that moment, I realized, in this house, I didn't. Something inside me shifted. The resentment that had been simmering quietly all these years began to boil. My pulse quickened, my jaw tightened, and for the first time, I felt something stronger than exhaustion. I felt anger, real, burning anger. And I knew it was only a matter of time before it exploded. By this point, I was running on fumes. My body was exhausted, my mind constantly buzzing with anxiety, and my spirit felt like it was barely hanging on. But what truly pushed me over the edge wasn't the bills, or the long hours, or even the constant demands. It was the way my family seemed to enjoy treating me like I was beneath them. One Friday night, I dragged myself home after an extra shift I had picked up to cover. Guess what? The car insurance. My uniform was stained, my hair smelled like grease, and all I wanted was to collapse in bed. But as I opened the front door, I froze. Laughter spilled out of the living room. My dad was sitting with his buddies, beers in hand, the TV blaring some game. On the table were pizza boxes, wings, chips, an entire spread of food. The kind of food I couldn't even afford for myself. And that's when it hit me, they were using my money. The extra shifts, the sleepless nights, the stress I carried, it was funding their good time. My dad looked at me over the rim of his beer bottle, smirking. "What? Don't just stand there. Grab us another case from the store." Something in me snapped. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My heart pounded, not from exhaustion this time, but from a fury that made my vision blur. For years, I had swallowed my pride, told myself this is what family does. But in that moment, I wasn't their family, I was their servant. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Do you have any idea what it takes for me to keep this house running? While you sit here drinking, I'm the one paying the bills. I'm the one keeping the lights on. Without me, everything falls apart." The room went silent. My dad's friends shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. But my dad, he didn't flinch. He slammed his beer bottle down so hard the table rattled. His face twisted with rage, and he bellowed a single word that echoed through the entire house. "Leave." The sound of it was like a gunshot. My chest tightened, my ears rang, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a command. Like I was disposable. I looked at him, waiting for some flicker of regret, some sign that he didn't mean it. But his eyes were cold. Unmoving. That was the moment everything changed. Because instead of breaking me, his words set me free. The word "leave" rang in my ears long after my dad spat it out. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the man who was supposed to protect me, love me, respect me, and realized he saw me as nothing more than a disposable wallet. The silence that followed was unbearable. His friends looked at the floor, suddenly more interested in their drinks than the scene unfolding before them. My mom hovered in the kitchen doorway, her lips pressed into a thin line, as if she wanted to speak but didn't dare. My brother didn't even glance up from his phone. It was like my existence didn't matter. My throat tightened. My first instinct was to cry, to run to my room and bury my face in the pillow the way I always did. But something inside me shifted. The years of sacrifice, the endless nights, the bills I had covered, it all boiled to the surface. And for the first time, instead of swallowing my feelings, I let them out. I took a step closer to the table. My voice trembled at first, but with each word, it grew stronger. You want me to leave? Fine. But let me remind you of what leaving really means. Every pair of eyes lifted toward me. My dad leaned back, smirking, like he expected me to back down. But I didn't. Do you remember the electricity bill last winter, Dad? The one that would have had us freezing in the dark. Who paid that? Me. Or how about the rent, when you blew half your paycheck on beer and came up short? Who covered it? Me. And this party right here, the pizza, the wings, the beer? Do you honestly think it paid for itself? No. It was me again. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I pointed at my brother, who finally looked up from his screen. And you? Every new game, every pair of sneakers. You think those just fell from the sky? You never once thought about where the money came from. You just assumed Hannah would handle it. The room was dead quiet. My mom's eyes glistened, but she still said nothing. My dad's smirk was gone. I placed my hands flat on the table, leaning forward so he couldn't ignore me. You've taken me for granted my entire life. Treated me like a servant, not a daughter. But here's the thing, you don't get to order me around anymore. You want me gone? Then congratulations. Because after tonight, you're on your own. Let's see how well this house runs without me. My chest was heaving, my palms sweaty, but for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt free. And as I turned to walk away, the weight I had carried for years finally started to lift. Walking out of that house felt like stepping into a different world. The night air was cool against my face, and for the first time in years, my shoulders felt light. I didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain, I was done being their safety net. At first, my family brushed it off. My dad acted tough, telling his friends that I'd come crawling back once she ran out of cash. My brother joked about having my room to himself. My mom, she stayed silent, as always. But then reality hit them. The next month, the electricity was shut off. The fridge went empty. The car payment defaulted. And without me working double shifts, there was no secret stash of money to cover their mistakes. The couch my dad loved so much was suddenly useless in the dark, quiet house. My brother's games went cold when the Wi-Fi was cut. I didn't have to see it to know. Word traveled fast through family, and soon enough, relatives whispered about how badly things had fallen apart. And the best part? No one came running to save them. Not this time. 2 months later, my mom showed up at the diner where I worked. She looked smaller, frailer, her eyes tired. She tried to smile, but it broke halfway. Your dad, he doesn't know how to handle things without you, she said softly. We miss you. For a split second, the old me, the girl who would have dropped everything to run back, almost surfaced. But then I remembered the years of being invisible, the years of sacrificing while they laughed and took. I set down the tray I was carrying and looked her straight in the eye. My voice was steady, calm. I warned him. I told all of you. Without me, everything falls apart. Now you know what that feels like. She didn't argue. She just nodded, tears filling her eyes, and walked away. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was simply stepping away and letting them choke on the weight I had carried alone for years. They had yelled, "Leave." So I did. And they were left in silence. Looking back, I realized something I wish I had learned sooner. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't a grand gesture, or shouting, or proving someone wrong in the moment. Sometimes, it's simply walking away and letting people face the consequences of their own actions. For years, I believed my value came from how much I could sacrifice for others. I thought being a good daughter meant bleeding myself dry to keep my family comfortable. But the truth is, love without respect isn't love at all. It's exploitation. When my dad told me to leave, he thought he was winning. He thought he was putting me in my place. But all he really did was free me. Free me from the weight of their debts, their expectations, their constant disrespect. And in the silence that followed my absence, they finally heard the truth. I wasn't the weak one. I wasn't disposable. I was the one holding everything together. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else, it's about reclaiming yourself. And I did. If Hannah's story gave you chills, hit that like button right now. And tell me in the comments, what's the most powerful way you've ever walked away from someone who took you for granted? I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your stories. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more stories that will shake you, inspire you, and remind you that justice always finds a way. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge is silence.